thank you for this opportunity to present our study, and I have collaborated this with Anneli Pajunen and Jukka Hyönä. And if you find any inconsistencies in this presentation, please keep in mind that I even get the name right in the third reading. I read the White Nights. I mean, oh, it's extended from the summer, midsummer. I have even memories here in being here in the summer, and now it's night white, so it was hard for me. And this is the content overview. Then I present some typological features of these L1s of the participants, Finnish, Russian, and Chinese, and information of the stimuli and participants, and a few words of operators, and then I introduce some approaches of this L2 processing and some earlier results, hypothesis, and our results and conclusions. And in the review, in differences between L2 and L1 and L2 processing, Klaasen and Felser point out that one of the key questions for the future research is how does the typological distance between L1 and L2 influence on L1 processing? And apparently there are no studies that have tested adult language processing in a situation where analytic L1 speakers in Chinese in this time and synthetic L2 differ maximally in terms of structural complexity of words. And this, what you presented yesterday, it's not published, so I'm excused that I don't mention that here. And the present study was designed as an attempt to fill this gap. And the complexity of the words in a given language is measured by the maximum number of formatives words can contain, and producing a category per word value. And there is an example of Finnish word, taloissammekin, and it has this base meaning house, and then and four more or less grammatical meanings. Plural inessive, first plural possessive, and clitic too. And well, this is pretty much that we try to operationalize this, that Russians are the typologically closer group because both, languages express semantic roles by case marking, and Chinese as typologically distant language. And here, I guess the critical this modifier head agreement that there is case, number, and possession, and Russian there is case and number, and also the classifier system gender is involved. Chinese have all numeral classifiers in these. And locative phrases which we are using here are noun and case, and preposition, noun and case in Russian, and Chinese preposition, noun, and locative particles. And this category per word, this complexity, which expresses the complexity of the word, is 1 base form and 5 formatives, and Russian 1 plus 4, and Chinese only the base forms. And some other things of this stimuli. Every participant read, 20 sentences with the modifier and 20 sentences without a modifier, and they were in illative and inessive cases, and they were matched on frequency and word length in characters. And in addition, after the reading the test, L2 participants answered the questionnaire in which they wrote that the L1 or English equivalent for each Finnish noun they have been read, the critical target word, and based on this, 3 items were excluded because they were so poorly known. Although it was also, this study material, but nevertheless they didn't do it well. And I had, of course, Chinese colleague who translated because I cannot get anything out of the Chinese writing. And these are the ways the target sentences differ from each other. In a modifier presence, there was either agreeing modifier preceded the target noun or the modifier was absent. And in case there were 2 locatives, inessive, which is approximately like in English, and illative, which is expressed by vowel extension plus N. Yeah, it's like into or for in English, depending on the context. And there, the bolded word is the target word, and which is in brackets is the modifier. So it's in English it's written quite different way. But this is, I believe that native speakers can confirm that these are completely natural sentences in Finnish. And these are some facts about the participants. 16 Chinese and 16 Russian and 22 Finns, and mostly women. And these Chinese, they were more coherent group. They had all passed this B1 level language test, so they were intermediate, and maybe Russians could be called pre-intermediate level. And I cannot, express this jargon. It's like if anybody who has familiar with air tracker study, they know better than me how it is going. It's like that you have this kind of headband, and you read sentences on the screen, and then the system compensates your head movements if you don't turn your back completely. We ask them to look at the screen, and then they just pretty much read for comprehension, and afterwards they are asked to every now and then to rephrase the sentence what they have just read. And that's about it, pretty much. And of course, eye movements are registered. And then we go to the models, and maybe the strongest model of transfer is proposed by Severin and Stowe, who suggest that native-like processing is possible only when L1 and L2 share the same structures. And of course, the critical here is the Chinese is very different from Finnish in this modifier head structure, as probably you got from this table. And therefore, of course, the idea is that according to this structure transfer hypothesis, only Russians should be able to native-like processing. And Koda is proposing quite different, more general transfer pattern in which the language learner would be able to make use of general ability that he or she has learned in L1, and crucially this ability may be applied to morphologically different L1 and L2, and the idea for her is that she studied, actually they were Koreans and Chinese processing English, I believe. And the idea that they are adept to integrating morphological word internal and contextual word external information because of the experience and using this radical, these parts of this Chinese characters, because they are very contextually, depend on the meaning. And similarly, of course, word internal, word external is Finnish modifier head agreement. And therefore, this model predicts that both Chinese and Russians are capable of native-like processing of L2 Finnish modifier head agreement. And Pienemann has put forward the processability theory, and it has some essential features, and the most critical is the first one, that acquisition is based on certain non-crossable developmental steps, and the crucial one is here at bold, that lexical level morphemes should be acquired before the phrase level morphology. And the additional idea is that the L2 learning is based on same universal procedures as L1 learning, and third, that there is the model doesn't suggest any transfer. So in this sense, you might think that the model predicts similar results for Chinese and Russians, but actually it's not the case, because the Chinese participants were already in a lexical decision experiment, and there they showed that they were not able to, they were unable to process Finnish case morphology in word recognition. In other words, this morphological complexity effect was not there with them. And there, according to this model, native Chinese participants should not be able to process Finnish. And then there are two other models, this shallow structure hypothesis, which as such, propose this shallower processing in L2, but they have this nice twist that if the two language structures are adjacent to each other, then native-like processing is possible even for L2. And this is the case in Finnish modifier head agreement. You cannot actually put anything between. This is the strictest combination in Finnish that you can have. So you can only have other modifier, but nothing else. And of course, therefore, this shallow structure hypothesis also is compatible with the idea that Chinese and Russians are doing similar things. And then finally, the competition model. And of course, the basic idea in competition model is that people tend to rely on both the most available and the most reliable cues in their native language. For example, word order or grammatical relations. And the idea is also that L2 learners are likely to transfer L2 features in L2 processing. And in this sense, of course, the model should be, supporting only that Russians would be able to do it. But they have also this nice addition that if the features are unique to L2, then the native-like processing is possible. There is no competition, but if it's only partially similar, that is the challenging case. And to our knowledge, there are no studies that have focused on L2 studies that are focused on syntactically based on modifier head case agreement. But there are L2 studies which deal with gender and number agreement. And there the result is that non-natives are able to detect violations in grammatical gender, although their processing is not necessarily similar to that of natives. And Tarban and Kempe were presumably the first who studied this modifier head agreement without using grammatical violations. And they studied L1 and L2 Russians, and the L2 speakers were English speakers. And their results imply that both natives and non-natives were able to use adjective inflection to disambiguate gender of the head noun. And some Finnish studies of modifier head agreement suggest that this agreement causes a delayed effect of agreement. In other words, it facilitates processing in a delayed manner after the first reading of the target noun. And finally, our hypothesis that this, you can put them into two groups, that this structure transfer hypothesis and processability theory assume that native Chinese speakers, okay, I can slow down. Okay, thank you. Yes, structure transfer hypothesis and processability theory assume that native Chinese speakers are incapable of native-like processing of modifier head agreement in L2 Finnish. And this general transfer hypothesis actually predicts that both groups should be capable of that kind of processing. And this competition model and shallow structure hypothesis are compatible with this idea. And all the models are compatible with this, that Russians can do well in processing Finnish. And before showing briefly the results, I just say that if there is some people who are not so familiar with these tracker studies, I introduce these terms that we are using. Case duration. If you think about these numbers are reflecting the spots where a person is looking at when they are reading, these fixation points. Then these 6 and 7 represent this case duration of the target words, meaning that this is the first pass reading. And then there is this selective regression part duration, which is this, they go 6, 7, then they go back. They don't go beyond this UNASA, which is the target. They go back in the beginning and start to read again. Then this 11 is included, that this selective regression part, this reading, as long as they don't go beyond the critical word, which in this case is this UNAS. And total fixation time is that they, as long as they read the sentence, all are calculated together. And this n+1, the word following the target, the case duration is calculated only in these cases where they directly come from the target noun to the word, the next word, not whenever they are coming to that. But in this study, most of even the non-natives did that type of processing. This, which is in this first line that they are got several times, it was not typical pattern. And here are the case duration of the target word. As you can see, there is this main effect of natives versus non-natives, which is trivial. But there was some tendency with non-natives, but it didn't came up significant. And then the selective regression path duration, both non-natives showed the effect, but natives, there was nothing, as you can see. And probability of related to this, you might notice that there was tendency that Russians were a little bit faster, but don't cheer up yet. I mean, there was a trade-off. There was a tendency that if this is the target word, Russians do like this, that they were faster in going forward, whereas Chinese were a little bit more like doing that before going beyond that word. But instead, I mean, Russians go quicker way, but then they did regression more often than Chinese. So that was kind of, for us this makes sense, because in Chinese you really have to make everything out of the word before you can continue, because the context of the word is so context dependent. And then there's total fixation time, and by the way, there is no interaction, of course, as you can see. It was a constant effect for all groups, and also here, although it was so tiny, the effect in Finns. And finally, the case duration of n+1 is that Finns saw highly significant effect, but it was not so much happening for non-natives. And conclusions that according to our results, it seems that typological distance measured as a complexity of the morphological complexity, as the complexity of the morphological structure of the words does not have a significant influence on processing L2 modifier head case agreement. And instead, the present results are compatible with the idea that a language learner is able to transfer a general linguistic ability learned in L1 to processing L2, which is very much this idea of this general transfer hypothesis. And the present results are also compatible with the view that structures completely unique to L2 pose no major challenge for non-native comprehenders. Instead, the present results are challenging for structure transfer hypothesis, because native-like processing seem to be possible even if they don't share the structure, and also this categorical non-crossable learning hierarchy doesn't seem to fit in this data. Это все. Спасибо большое.
Thank you. Okay. Questions, please. Do we have questions?
Everybody is so tired. We can go already.
I have one question. You accept quite a radical interpretation, well, I mean very unequivocal, I should say, interpretation of your results. But you have some trends that would suggest that Russians are better approximated.
Yeah, but you have to keep in mind that I wanted to keep them like, if anything, their fluency is a little bit lower than Chinese, because if they were, if I wouldn't mind of the fluency, then I could get Russians who are almost like native speakers. Then the critic would be that, okay, because they are so fluent, what you can say about it. Therefore, I had hard times to find, because my Chinese group was that I could find, this is the group that I have, that or nothing. Therefore, I try to match these Russians, and they were not, I mean, exactly the same level, because the thing is that they are typically, you can get in these kind of language courses people, but when they get this B1 level, that is after that they will leave away, and I try to keep the same groups of also of Russians for both experiments, but they were spreading all over the country. I didn't get them.
Okay.
So that's why but compared to the level, they are doing somewhat better, but there is no robust effect that in a sense that some can do something and the other group are incapable.
All right. Do we have more questions? Thank you very much then. I want to say a couple of words before we